Good morning. It is a great pleasure to introduce today's Cantata of the Week. My name is Tim Brown, and I was director of Clare College Choir when the Cantata pilgrimage made its way to Cambridge in 2001. I grew up close to the home of John Eliot, and from an early age was aware of his prodigious musical talent. Schütz, I remember, was the composer I first heard in performances by the Gardiner family and friends, who enjoyed exploring a repertoire almost unknown to the musical public at that time. It was also then that I was introduced to early LP recordings of Bach's choral music by Karl Richter's Munich Bach Choir and by Otto Klemperer. They were, in their own way, wonderful, but to my young ears there was always something missing. The music making, fine as it was, seemed somehow flat-footed, even if I didn't know why. A little later, like a ray of sunshine, a new generation of scholar conductors, inspired in England by Paul Steinitz and the London Bach Society, informed by a serious and groundbreaking attempt at period performance, and in the original German, a novelty at that time, began to reveal the transparency and vitality of Bach's music. This process was radically transformed by the introduction of authentic Baroque instruments in ensembles such as the Steinitz Bach players and later the Monteverdi Orchestra, finally revealing subtleties and colors in the music that had lain more or less dormant for some 200 years. What a thrill then in 2001 for the choral scholars of Clare and Trinity colleges, members of whose choirs in 1964 had been in the original Monteverdi Choir, to be invited by John Eliot to take part in the Cambridge leg of his cantata pilgrimage. And what a joy it turned out to be to hear Bach dancing in the wonderful King's Acoustic, which you will hear in the concluding silence at the end of today's performance. This week's cantata is number 127, Herr Jesu Christ, wahr Mensch und Gott, composed for Quinquagesima Sunday in 1725, with a text based on a hymn by Paul Eber that draws on today's gospel, in which Christ's death and resurrection is depicted by Bach in an extraordinary array of musical imagery. The depth and range of his imagination is, as always, mind-boggling, given that he was writing a new cantata each week. There is nothing here that is remotely routine. It is scored lightly for soprano, tenor, bass soloist, chorus, with a combination of recorders and oboes underpinned by strings that, with Baroque instruments, creates a perfect tonal balance. A solo trumpet appears in the fourth movement. The second movement is a tenor recitative in which the anguish of the dying soul gives way to a realization that in death Jesus will be there to comfort and sustain. This leads into the exquisite aria, Die Seele ruht, my soul rests, I am unafraid of dying. So beautifully sung here by the soprano Ruth Holton, who by chance had at one time been a choral scholar at Clare. Her words recall the great passion texts that preoccupied Bach around this period in his life. And it cannot be coincidental that in this aria, the accompaniment of staccato recorders, with solo oboe weaving its beautiful melodic thread around them, has more than a passing acquaintance with Ceflisa from the St. John Passion. The contrast with the highly dramatic bass aria and arioso that follows, evoking Judgment Day, could not be more striking. This is where we hear the trumpet. Again, references to the Passions are heard. First, an echo of the central section of Es ist vollbracht from the St. John, and then repeatedly something very like Zint Blitzer, Zint Donner from the as yet uncomposed St. Matthew Passion. A simple yet subtly harmonized chorale, a prayer for forgiveness and faith in the face of approaching death, concludes this moving cantata. But it is the first movement, a choral fantasia based on the melody of Eber's hymn, that is the most striking part of the whole work. Not only does the movement draw on Eber's tune, heard in a myriad of contrapuntal combinations, but Bach, with his supreme gift for musical jigsaw puzzles, also weaves in the melody of the so-called Lutheran Agnus Dei, Christe du Lamm Gottes, Christ, thou Lamb of God. To point this out to the innocent ear, so to speak, John Eliot took the bold and original step of adding the words to the melody for the performance in Cambridge. You hear this sung by the undergraduate sopranos and altos. The result, as he says in his recording liner notes, sounded vibrant and exciting and gave an inkling of how the St. Matthew Passion might have sounded in the 1730s, its double chorus augmented by a third choir singing from the Swallow's Nest Gallery in St. Thomas's. For the purists amongst you, the CD does contain a version without the additional words. My young students had the time of their lives singing this magnificent music with John Eliot and the marvelous Monteverdi Choir. It was a huge privilege. I hope you feel some of their excitement in today's relay of that exuberant yet tender performance, and will go on to explore the over 200 more cantatas in which Bach reveals his genius.